That's our panelists. Oh, and we're recording in progress. So that's our panelists. That's who we're going to be hearing from today, but we want you to be part of this conversation as well. So feel free to make yourself known in the chat. If you want to say hello, let us know where you're joining from. We would love that. And also to get to know a little bit more about you, we're going to start with one poll question. So Christine, if you could put up the question around board service, that would be great. And let us know, have you ever served on a board? We'll give a few 30 seconds or so for folks to answer that. Right, Christine, when you think we have a decent amount of participation. All right, so exciting. About half of our attendees today have not served on a board. So welcome, welcome, welcome. This is exactly what this is about, exploring new spaces and figuring out why voices who haven't been in spaces might be a value add to them. We have about a quarter of people who've sat on one board, about a quarter who are in 2 to 4, and a small group that are just lifelong board service folks with lots and lots of board experience. So welcome to everyone. That's great to see. I think we'll get into our first question for our panelists. So all of our panelists currently do sit on boards or have sat on boards in some capacity, but I want to take us back to the pre-board time. So think of maybe one or a couple notable board experiences and get in your mindset prior to those experiences. I want to know what sparked your interest, what made you think, yeah, I could be aligned to this, and what made you a bit hesitant, or maybe what did you see as a hurdle? And Marielle, do you want to start us off?
I would love to. So I have very minimal board experience. I have what I would describe as board light experience, which we can get to later. But I would say for me, the biggest thing I was using to disqualify myself is a lack of preparedness and a lack of professional experience. So I am a freelancer, and I have more or less been a freelancer and contract worker the entirety of my career. And so for me, a board was always something that like people that had salaried jobs would do. I think Chantel teased me earlier this week and said, my idea of a board member was someone that owned a pinstripe suit. I do not own a pinstripe suit. And so I often discounted myself and my skill set when looking at or considering joining boards, because I don't have a typical corporate background. In fact, I have a background that I think a lot of my generation millennials would agree with having, which is a combination of different jobs that you have collected or accrued to make a career that fits your lifestyle versus a career that is very, stereotypical when you imagine what a career looks like. And so I think for me, that was always my biggest hurdle in thinking about whether or not I should be on a board, I should apply, I should learn about boards. It's this idea that I don't look like the idea in my head of what a board member should look like, because I don't have a career path that in my head aligns with what a board member's career path looks like. And I think that that is a hurdle across boards of trying to reconnect with perhaps some of these younger generations that don't take typical career paths. And something I have noticed in looking at board applications and things like that, often they cite very specific careers, looking for someone with accounting, professional accounting experience, or professional law experience, or professional experience in fundraising or things like that. And none of my career would directly relate to any of those things. And so I just always assumed a board wasn't for me, even though I do believe and have learned through working with DirectHer that boards are such a great way to get involved in your community and to enact change in organizations that define the communities that we're in. And so as a person that loves politics but isn't necessarily interested in going into politics, for me, boards has become another entry point of trying to create lasting and significant change within your community. So I think you asked a lot of questions, but in a nutshell, I didn't think of myself as a board member because in my head, I don't represent or have a path that would lead me to that position, but I also believe they are important and a great way for people to get involved in their communities and shape organizations that they're passionate about, but feel like they have no control over.
That's great. Thank you, Marielle. Erin, what about you? Thinking on kind of both the what interested you, but what maybe pulled you back?
Yeah, so interesting perspective from my vantage point, maybe a little bit different than Marielle's. I've spent a lot of my career in the corporate world. So I think I've sort of had that exposure to the conversation about boards. And then I also have a sort of unique perspective in previous positions doing strategic planning and working directly with the boards of the organizations that I was working for at the time. So I think I sort of had this concept of like, okay, boards, really interesting. What are they doing? So my curiosity sparked in terms of like, is that something for me? I think part of my barrier would have been age. And, you know, I guess I've been sitting on boards probably for the last 5 or 6 years, but I thought, well, why would my voice matter at the table? There's people who are, you know, more experienced than I am, that experience blends well to the conversations that are happening at these boardroom tables. And I thought, well, what perspective would I add when joining the board? So obviously that has changed dramatically for me. I think everyone's voice matters. And I think that that's probably the one thing I want everyone to leave and really think about is your perspectives are actually extremely valuable within these conversations, and especially in the work that I do, where we want diversity in terms of people's perspectives and experiences coming in to help direct these decisions. I will share too, my first board experience was more out of I should get some board experience, and I had a skill set that was not on the board at the time in terms of strategic planning. And it was a really great experience. But for me now, and you'll notice in the boards that I sit on now, they have a personal connection for me. So they connect to the work that I'm doing every single day. And I've become very passionate about that work. And so sometimes too, when you're thinking about what boards to go on, I think that's something to consider and really figuring out where do you want to take your career? Where do you want your voice to come forward? And for me in 2020, I told myself I wanted to be more connected to the city of Edmonton. I've always lived here, but always tried to sort of seek these global experiences. And so as I told myself that opportunity of like, how can I bring my voice a little bit closer to home, that's where the Explore Edmonton opportunity presented itself. So something else to consider as we navigate this is, where do you want your voice to show up?
That's great. I'm wondering, before we move to Jen, if anyone relates to the 2 points that have been raised thus far, a concern around my value given my age or my value given my professional background, or kind of mix. If anyone relates to that, can you throw up your hand? I'll just watch. Yeah, okay, I'm seeing. Great. A lot of relatability there. And so if you have further questions on that, feel free to bring them up. But I think, once again, this is about normalizing it. We're all kind of feeling these things, and yet we see people kind of navigating them and rising above. So we can talk about how that's happened. Jen, what about you? Thinking about that balance of what interests me versus what held me back?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for inviting me to take part today. Definitely identifying with what Erin and Chantel have said. And I do own a pinstripe suit. More than one, but still feeling like, boards have always been somewhat of a mystery. And, my mom has served on community boards in relation to her interests. My dad spent some time in local politics, so I watched them go to meetings and go through agendas. And boards were still somewhat of a mystery to me. So I think when we look at, perhaps what held me back, knowing exactly what happens around those tables, if I were to join a board, what exactly do you want me to do? Is it calling people to elicit donations? Is it going building to building along White Ave and asking if we can put up a poster for our event? Is it, leveraging relationships? And I put that in air quotes because another big piece of it for me, boards use somewhat of a mysterious language, I find as well, a business parlance. And all the work I did in journalism, journalists are constantly trying to boil things down to everyday language. So boards, on the other hand, have this, this language around the work that they do. And I think that's somewhat of an intimidating factor. But certainly for myself, I don't know if others have found that as well, but that whole kind of mystery around what actually happens on the table, what actually in hard tack terms would my roles and responsibilities be, and what is it that happens there anyways. So those are the sort of things that have held me back and initially held me back. But on the interest side, I think there's such great potential to give back and to share skills in a different way, and to be involved in community initiatives in a different sort of way. With my background in journalism, you get asked to MC a lot of things, and that can involve, taking part in the program and the event planning and advising on those types of things. But that's a little bit of involvement over a wide number of groups. So board work has a depth to it that's interesting to me as well.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe before I kind of navigate next questions with our panel, we can do another poll, because I know we do have one about what's preventing you or has prevented you from board service. So let's get a sense of what you have to say. And if you put other, please let us know some of those ideas in the chat. Christine, when you think there's enough participation, just let us know what the results look like. Megan's mentioning time and qualification concerns. Shannon's talking about job title. Okay, so we have about 44% talking about that qualification piece, 9% talking about what's my value, 22% talking about time. And I think that's a good one. Like, that shows that you're going in a very informed way, which is a really positive attribute. Deborah talking about wanting to give others opportunities. And I think that's a super mindful approach to it. And then talking about the right opportunity too. And that's really tied to both what Erin and I know Jen might have something to say on too, about once we kind of build up a bit of confidence to take the first step, we don't actually just have to say yes to anything that comes by. We can do some sort of kind of filtering and narrowing, because that will ensure the best board experience for the board and for us too. So for all my panelists, then let's talk about how you've navigated these hurdles. What are kind of tools in your tool belt that have helped you come up and above any of these hesitations, or maybe any other structural barriers you've seen? Marielle, do you want to start?
Yeah, I have been thinking about something in relation to the people saying that they want to give more diverse voices an opportunity for those board positions. I wholeheartedly agree with it. I would also encourage consideration of, is it just about giving spaces, or is it about also joining boards and making sure that the mandate internally is for more diverse voices, and also that they're safe spaces or spaces where diverse voices will be heard? I think there's often I'll count myself out so someone else can take that space and take up that space, without thinking about the pedagogy of the organization and thinking about the complexities of that organization, and if they're even in a place to be able to hear diverse voices, to be able to prioritize diverse voices over typical candidates that on paper look more quote unquote attractive because they have skill sets that perhaps the board is searching for. So I just wanted to flag that of like, yes, of course, please do not apply for board positions that specifically say like, we are looking for diverse candidates that identify within these marginalized groups because we want a more diverse perspective on our board. But I also think that often there is a danger in assuming diverse candidates will apply for boards unless it is specifically being made clear that that's who they're seeking. And also that if they join those boards, there will be a level of acceptance and celebration of their diversity and safety for that diverse member. So it's just something maybe to think about of like, well, if there's no diverse voices already on this board, would someone from an intersectional background feel safe even applying? Is there value to me joining for a short time to help create some of the things that need to be in place to make a board more diverse so that more diverse candidates feel safe applying or are being sought out to apply for this board? It's just something I'm thinking about of like, counting yourself out if you come from a place of privilege doesn't always directly mean someone more diverse will apply, especially if part of the board's problem with its diversity and members joining is that it isn't set up to be inclusive from the start. And is there a potential for you to use your privilege to create that space and then back out? Is there value to that? In boards specifically struggling with diversity that are, you know, typically cis white individuals and especially cis white men led. So that was just a thought of like the stepping back part of, are you stepping back to give a safe space to people that should absolutely be taking that space? Or are you stepping back and the same people keep getting on the boards? And is there something more powerful you can do by putting your name forward? Sorry, Chantel, I know that wasn't the question.
No,
but
it's
it
great.
was.
I think it alludes so well to the fact that people often, you know, have this conversation about the intersections of effective board governance and diversity on boards. And they are so ingrained, you know, it's hard to be an effective board without broad perspective on opportunity and risk, but simply seeking out certain folks and not creating a space where that opinion can be explored safely, and a process for a decision-making process that actually allows consensus to be built in an effective way is not going to achieve the goal either. And so I think it's a very valid point, especially for some of the folks on the board call today who have multiple board experiences, is to be thinking about the way they can use their privilege to create the right conditions on the boards they are on. So that's very valuable for the people who are on boards on this call. Anything you want to add on the hurdles bit that you've navigated, or things that have helped you navigate?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest hurdles is trying to drill down. So, well, that's such a corporate-y speak type thing. If they're saying we are looking for someone with media experience, maybe asking what the skill sets are. If they're looking for someone with accounting experience, maybe ask what the skill sets are. And I think it's for someone posting board positions or on a board, how are we increasing the language that we use to make it seem more accessible to people that assume they're underqualified? And I also think that reaching out to members that are on the board, if your qualifications don't perfectly line up with the qualifications listed on a board posting, if it's an organization you're really passionate about, reaching out and saying like, I'm not sure if my qualifications apply. Here are some strong suits I have. Here are some skills I'd love to bring. And to break down versus if it just says accounting, I'm not an accountant, therefore I shouldn't apply. Maybe they just want someone that understands the basics of balancing a book, which like I'm sure a lot of people have that skill set. So I think really understanding what boards are looking for, and even if you have none of the qualifications they're looking for, if you're really passionate about that board, I would say still apply and still put your name forward. Because and Chantel, you can obviously speak to this more, but I think a person that's passionate about a board can learn some of the hard and soft skills required to sit on that board versus someone that might have the perfect resume but truly doesn't care about the organization or what the organization does. And so to not assume that a lack of experience automatically means you don't have value to add to that space.
Yeah, I love that there's a tip for both the board in there, and then there's a tip for a potential candidate in there. The tip for the board being recognize the abundance of models that boards operate with, and that you kind of have to do some educating in your posting, in seeking people to help them understand what kind of board it is. And when we say a certain skill, how that skill is being brought and the expectation around it, because you can never be clear enough. And then for the candidate side of things, recognize it's okay to test things, to test whether you're understanding the application as it's posted, or if there's there's opportunity to present skills that may not be directly listed. So I have a tip there for both sides. Erin, your thoughts on this one?
Well, first of all, I don't know if there's much more that I can add. Marielle, that was like amazing coverage on the topic. No, it was. And maybe I'll emphasize the pieces that I think really stand out for me. I think we're making some assumptions. I think we're making assumptions that all board positions are posted somewhere. I don't think that that's true, unfortunately. I think they definitely should be posted. But a lot of times these opportunities come from word of mouth. We need someone. Who do you know? Again, if you can post them, please post them. But this is the reality of where we're sort of living in terms of board experience. And so if you're on this call listening and you're wanting to give back to community, start socializing that within your networks, because as you socialize that and bring that forward to other people, they're going to go, oh, I was part of this other conversation, and maybe here's this opportunity, and you can go explore that and see if it's the right opportunity for you. And I think we're also making an assumption on like taking a step back from some of the comments on like, well, we want diverse perspectives. And so women are underrepresented on boards, like period. And so, yes, we can talk about intersectionality in terms of that representation as well, meaning women of color, Indigenous women, women with different abilities. But the bottom line is there's still an underrepresentation. So I still encourage the conversation to be had to say, here's what I can bring to the table. Is that of value? Don't make the assumption without having the conversation. And I think that that sort of translates to my corporate experience in the corporate world, where we see a lot of women not applying for things because they're not 100% qualified. And so let's not have that same statistic show up from a board perspective, because really at the end of the day, everything that I do is volunteer right now. I mean, maybe in the future that will look different, and that's maybe part of my goals. But right now it's my give back, because I don't have a big financial portfolio to donate, millions of dollars, hundreds of dollars to lots of different charities. And so for me, my time is that give back. So figure out where, if that's what you want to do, where is your time most relevant, and start to have those conversations and network with individuals on that possibility, because I think that opens up pathways as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Erin. And I'll just say, because it's been my own personal experience, that it takes confidence to say, these are my skill sets. And sometimes what's helpful to ground that conversation is to have a bit of a sense of what a board might be looking for, right? To understand some of the core pillars of work that boards should or are doing. And so if that's going to help you, if kind of a core basic understanding is going to help you better translate your skills or engage in conversation, then great, get that education. That's kind of what DirectHer's all about. But don't also think that you have to be educated to a certain point until you can even have those conversations. Use it as additive. Oh, this is going to help me engage in a conversation, rather than can't have the conversation until I've been there. You can have the conversation whenever you want. Things just might make you feel more confident in having those conversations. Jen, your thoughts on this one?
So when you use the word earlier on, you were talking about the tools that we could all use. And can I give a shout out to the Board Basics seminar that DirectHer puts on? I'm not going to stop you, Jen. I'm not going to stop you. A shout out to DirectHer and all the work that you do. Honestly, I stalked your social media account for months, waiting for the next session and the next registration for that particular seminar, because sometimes the confidence to just have a sense of the basics. What kinds of boards are there, and what exactly, how does this all work? For anyone who's interested, that seminar really does give a great foundation just for some of the language. And then I think another tool in the kit is questions, and a lot of questions. And Erin and Marielle have identified some of the different hurdles to being involved, or some of the considerations, who else is putting their name forward and having more women in boards. And so if you can really find people to ask those questions of, what specifically would I be doing? It says accounting, but what do you really mean by that? And then watching others in action, when you do get that first seat at the table, learning from others, side conversations on, hey, I noticed, this happened today, would it have been appropriate for me to raise XYZ if you don't yet feel comfortable in raising it? Chantel, you alluded earlier to my first board experience. So I can share a little bit about that now, just as a whatever sort of help it may give everyone else. The first time I was asked to serve on a board, the ask was, it was something along the lines of, we meet 4 or 5 times a year for a couple hours. And that felt like the perfect time commitment to me, because I think time is huge here. And so I was very flattered to be asked. I didn't really ask any more questions. I said, hey, that sounds great. Would love to help out. And it immediately became pretty clear to me it wasn't the best fit for both the time I had, the method that I was looking to give back, and even maybe not a great fit for my overall value set. So real learning experience for me, just to really ask those questions, drill down on, okay, we're meeting a few times a year, but what other side responsibilities are involved? Who's all involved in helping out? Are there committees? Are there subcommittees? And then being really honest with yourself when you get to that table, if this is the time commitment that you have, and it's apparent there's great need for more time, further time, how would you deal with that? Do you jump in with both feet and try to fill all those gaps that you can see, or will you be okay with, keeping those boundaries for yourself? And that sort of fits under the questions, section of the tools in the toolkit to sort of look at where your involvement might begin. But that one for me, for sure, was a real learning experience. And then went on to just thinking of another board that I was part of, our advisory committee, the 1000 Women Advisory Committee, at that table, really sitting back and learning from some incredible community leaders was a great help to me as well.
Yeah. It's this, I always come back to the words of Brene Brown and clear as Klein, because I think we are scared to, we assume that the situations we are entering have it all figured out. And as someone who has consulted and worked with a lot of boards, it is, especially in the not-for-profit sector or with Crown Corps or whoever else, you got people coming together for a narrow amount of time, trying to do good, a lot of good intent, but not necessarily always a lot of good process or kind of figuring out what our job is. We get so keen to do the job, we don't talk about what the job is first. And so if you just assume that they have had that conversation come in, your expectations might be wildly off, and you might be leading to disappointment. And this is something we've talked about. My biggest goal is to inform people, to make people have the ability to have informed experiences. So I'm choosing to be on this board. I know what I'm getting myself into, and this is aligned with my goals, rather than pushing people into experiences that are awful and they never want to have again, because that doesn't help this overall issue of gender parity if we push people into one-off experiences that they never want to replicate. So I 100% agree with you, Jen, that you have the ability to ask questions, whether that's of the organization's operational leader, whether it's of the board, whether it's of people who were previously on the board. Find someone who works for you to kind of test what the experience is. And one of the things I always say is ask this one question, ask the board, how do you add value? If they can give you an answer to that, first and foremost, it's a good sign. Talk to a couple board members, see if you get the same answer. It'll be so illuminating as to what your job's going to be, because really a board should always be coming back to that question, what's our value proposition? And all those technical choices should be aligned to it. We will get to some of the Q&As towards the end. So I think I'll just move on here. I want to talk, because especially like Marielle's brought it up, a few people have brought it up around what skills are valuable on a board. I think a lot of us assume, oh, I have to be a lawyer and accountant. And then even the lawyers, I could say this is one formerly, like, I don't know if I add value. And so I want to talk about some of the skills that have surprised you the most to be value adding, either in yourself or that you witnessed on the board. And maybe we'll turn it around and we'll start with Jen this time.
Well, first of all, you need a suit, at least one, and it should be blue with pinstripes. Just kidding. Yeah, I feel like that ability to ask questions also fits well with board experience, because as you're at that decision-making table, with my very limited experience, it seems part of it to me is asking those questions. Why are we as an organization doing this? What else haven't we considered in making this decision? Why are we recommending this course of action? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Who else do we need to include? What are our overall goals? So a curious mind, I think, is part of it. And I think also time is a huge factor here. One of my girlfriends, we were talking about, this session coming up today, and she said, for a lot of people, I think it's, what is the time commitment? So really considering what kind of time you have to give, what kind of flexibility you might have in that. Does your schedule align with the board work? Do they always meet in the afternoon and that's not going to work with your school pickup? Those sorts of things. And then maybe skills that, you think about your skill set in one way, but perhaps a board might think of it in another way. So, Marielle is an extremely talented social media communicator, photographer, writer. Those are all highly valued communication skills. Photography skills. Is there a graphic design element in there where the board needs advising on how they present themselves to the wider community, that sort of thing. And I think we tend to think about our skill sets in terms of the job that we're currently doing or the job we most recently did. My job title is this and I do this. But as someone who's recently been through a fairly significant job change, it can be quite refreshing to think about your skill set using entirely different language. And that's an exercise that I think could apply to thinking about yourself and thinking about what you might have to offer a board. I see Kirby Bourne is here, and she's got journalist experience as well. And so that's taking complex information and synthesizing it into key messages. And right there, that's not how the media world tends to think about those skills, but that's a highly sought after skill set as well. So maybe just taking a look at your skills and starting to maybe think about them with a different lens.
That transferability of skills, I think. Let's let go of those titles and let's think about what the core skills at the root of what we're doing is. Erin, your thoughts on some of the most surprising skills, or maybe not surprising, but ones you want to repeat?
Yeah, so I would agree with Jen. Curiosity was the one thing that I sort of wrote down, but maybe I'll give two examples and I will try to share them quickly because, again, these are actually what I've lived through. So when I was on the community wellbeing and safety and wellbeing task force, I sat at that table and I was like, why am I here? We are like, I challenged myself and wondered, there are people who have spent a lot of time looking at racism, looking at policing structures, looking at homelessness, a lot of things that I had not done in any amount of depth. But I sat back and went, why was I chosen? Because I bring a background in diversity and inclusion, creating inclusive spaces and making sure voices get heard. And so I reminded myself quite constantly, because I was really having to get up to speed on a lot of things as part of those conversations. I said, but everyone's voice and perspective matters at this table, but it's everyone being heard. So I was really conscious to reminding myself of what my skill set was and not feeling intimidated because I didn't know everything. Because when you're on a board, you don't need to know everything. You need to be able to understand and be part of the conversation, but everyone's bringing different skill sets. So I just want to share that as sort of a reminder of, as you do that work that Jen just talked about, own that. That is what you're going to bring to the table, and remind yourself of that when you get there and you go, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Because we're all resilient, and I think we can figure out and do the research to be ready to have those conversations, but don't get sort of taken down a pathway of like, oh, I don't know enough on this, because really boards are acting up here, right? Like we aren't down in the weeds. That's what management and operations do. The second one is very real time. As I sit on the Explore Edmonton board, I was asked to be the chair of the HR committee. I am not a HR professional. I have worked in HR. So I remind myself all the time that I kind of do have HR adjacent experience. And as part of chairing this committee, we have now gone through hiring a CEO. If you asked me a year ago if I knew how to go through and hire a CEO, I would have laughed and said, what? And you're putting me in charge of that? So there's a reality check for everyone, me being really vulnerable and sharing that. It was an amazing process. We haven't shared who the candidate is. It will be shared soon, but they shared that the process was inclusive, that they felt that they were being brought along the entire way, that there was communications happening along that process. And that was the value that I brought. So maybe I had to lean on some of the other resources for that process, but you can do it. Like, I think this is the other reminder is like, sure, we all have different things. So take Jen's challenge and think about how you can present that to the board that you want to give back to. But I think we're all adaptive and resilient to be able to bring our voices to the table and add value.
Yeah, I think the best board experiences are ones where an individual gives and receives. And don't forget about the receiving part of it, receiving learning experiences, going through new things, gaining skills. That is all completely acceptable. And so anticipate that you won't have done it all or know it all or whatever. And I think, Erin, to your point, maybe just a cue too, if you're struggling to remember why you were on the board, find a trusted person on the board and say, can you remind me? Like, it's okay to have a buddy on the board to say, like, bring me back to why you need me here. And if you're not having that message in your own head, that could be the chair, that could just be someone trusted. That's really helpful. Marielle, your thoughts on this, and then we'll go to the Q&A and we'll talk to some of these questions.
Yeah, so my board experiences, baby board experience, I sit on my building's condo board. And I think that board experience is so wonderful. Like, whether it's, we had kind of talked about this previously, whether it's like, you're sitting on your child's preschool board or committees or things like that. I think all of that experience cumulatively builds up to not just teaching you the function of how boards work, getting you used to the rhetoric and the language and format of board meetings and things like that in an environment where, like, it's being on a condo board is very low pressure. It's both high pressure, low pressure. High pressure because it's your house and lots of money is wrapped up in it. Low pressure because it's literally you and your neighbors, and so everyone is working together, which, like, I have really enjoyed that as my first board experience. So building skills in that way is something that I think is incredibly beneficial. And so starting with boards that feel really approachable, even if they're really small, to start building that experience. And I think building that experience helps build that confidence. And in a lot of questions I have about gender parity and about gender representation, often I think a lot of it comes back to as women, we are often taught that being braggy about our skills or being confident in our skills is off-putting. And there are a lot of words that I find are often very coded in adjectives for women specifically, of being too bossy, too demanding, all of those skills that are often encouraged in our male counterparts. And so I think finding ways to build confidence in a board is so important, because you're also building confidence in your own skill set, so you can put your own name forward and you can say, oh no, that is something I can do. So the kind of the references Erin was making of like, oh, I have worked in an HR space. Have I done this exact thing with this skill set I have? No, but I have the scaffolding that I can fill in. And I think that that's something DirectHer talks about all the time of, well, maybe you're just organizing, massive schedules for a bunch of people. Well, that's probably really useful for a lot of boards to have someone that can look at timelines and multiple schedules and organizing those sorts of things. So really finding ways to foster confidence in your own skill set, knowing that there are very few people in the world that are in positions where they're like, oh, I have every skill set I could ever need always. And so putting your name forward, even if you don't have that exact skill set for that exact situation all the time, always, doesn't mean you're not qualified to come into that position, figure it out as you go, and use the skill and knowledge you have, and that you get and should be confident about the skills that you're bringing to that table, especially if they're skills that you are afraid other people might view as not comprehensive enough. I assure you they probably are.
That's a great point, Marielle, and it kind of ties into some of the questions I'm seeing, which is there are board experiences and there are also board adjacent experiences. So we've used the word committee today. I'm just going to very quickly say that is just a focused work group. Sometimes it can report to a board, sometimes it can report to operations, sometimes it can advise a board. Those can be experiences that are adjacent to board work that give you a real nice look inside to see if this is something with this specific organization you want to continue, or you want to continue within a different stream or different industry. So there was a question about how do I find board opportunities if they aren't publicly posted? There are sources for sure, like specific ones that come to mind. volunteerconnector.org is an Alberta-based one where you can filter by director position. Shameless plug, DirectHer sends out an email that puts our opportunities in it. There's something called Board Ready Women. They share opportunities. There are government-based opportunities. So municipal ones like Erin's had on a committee. There are provincial ones. Those generally recruit on a certain schedule. So my biggest tip for you is search an industry you're interested in and the words board, agency, or commission and see what pops up. But recognize there's some in the not-for-profit sector, there's some in the government sector, and then there are probably some that are just going to pop up in addition to that. Kind of know where you're at. Any other things to add to that about where to look for board opportunities from the other three panelists? Erin, yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to emphasize that plug for DirectHer. So I am solely on, well, maybe we won't use that language, but like my experience also helped me get on the board. But I got the email from DirectHer and I saw the email Friday morning and I had told myself I wanted Edmonton-based experience, and there was the Explore Edmonton posting and it said, we're looking for someone with diversity and inclusion experience. So like, you know, there is songbirds singing and I was like, oh no, I need to get this in by 5:30 today or 5 o'clock or whatever it was. And so I had to excuse myself from a meeting that I was in and say, can I multitask as we're in here? Because I need to get this done. And so I got that thing in right towards the end of the application process. But it was through those emails as a really great source of information to start scanning and start looking, oh, that kind of speaks to me. What speaks to you? Make note of it, write it down, put it in your phone, whatever method works for you, and start to build out what is out there. And so you can start to think about, what am I going to start looking for? And I cannot emphasize enough leaning into your network, having those conversations, building those relationships. And Chantel, I'm sure you've started to notice this. I see board positions now coming through on LinkedIn. So I think people are a bit more sophisticated.
The algorithm's reading my brain now, for sure.
yeah, exactly. So there's multiple ways to look for it, but pair that you looking for it with what you actually want too, and make sure you're clear on that too.
I just want to be mindful of time, so I'm gonna. Oh yeah, go ahead, Marielle.
Oh, I had a question. Is it a faux pas, because I don't know the answer to this, is it a faux pas to reach out to a board you're really interested in working for and saying like, hey, do you have any open seats on your board right now? Do you have any way that you notify people? Like, can you just ask a board you want to be on?
100%. How I would probably phrase it, especially if the board's a bit more established, mature, is to ask them, what's your recruitment process? Because some boards are going to want to know, want to see you having previously been involved with the organization in some capacity. So then you know, okay, maybe I need to volunteer for a bit with this organization in an operational role. Some of them may want to recruit from governance committees. So you might think, I need to find my way onto one of those committees if that's what I want. Or they might say, yeah, we're recruiting in 6 months. You have to show up at the AGM, which is the annual general meeting, whatever. So ask them what's your recruitment process, and that will be very, very helpful. And they'll probably actually put a little star beside your name because they already know you are showing some interest, right? And that's huge. There was a question about what's your tip for taking a first step if you don't have board experience. So Jen, do you want to navigate this one?
Yeah, I was just actually trying to figure out how to raise my hand in the thing, because I think Erin and Marielle and yourself have shared such great tips here. But what about, and I'll just throw this out there as a question, sort of suggestion. What about through your workplace? If your workplace has, a charity that they're involved in, and the charity has a board, or because I'm thinking there would be intersections of, you could get a few hours off work for board meeting, that sort of thing that really helps on the making space and time for it, and the internal support from your professional community. And then also there's a great feedback loop there and sort of feeding back what's going on. So question about that. And then also, I guess, another great place, community leagues, those sorts of starting to get that board adjacent experience, preschool board, we talked about the other day, condo board, those sort of, Marielle.
Those are all boards, by the way. These are all valid, properly constituted boards. They are not pretend boards or anything like that. They are real board experiences, and sometimes
but less intimidating than, say, a major fundraising foundation for the Stollery or the Alex or one. We have these major institutions in our city, and there's national boards, and I feel like something with a smaller reach and a more clearly defined focus is maybe a great place to start. But I'm curious about that workplace intersection as well.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is that it's really helpful to know, how do I want to give back? Because as Erin said, I want to give back. If we're talking about these kind of sectors, how do I want to give back? What's the best alignment to my skills, and what's the best alignment to my goals? So if your goal is to be part of a team, you might choose that I want to volunteer operationally, and that's the best way to give back. And maybe through your workplace, there's a way to do that. If you are really, my goals and skills are best aligned with board work, you can see if there's some sort of relationship. I think generally I see on the workplace that it's usually pushing more into the operations side of things than the governance side of things, but that might be a stepping stone to governance work. I'm going to very quickly, there was a couple questions on here that are really easy for me to answer. So Robert's Rules of Order, this is a process boards use. It is my arch nemesis in the world. And it is the arch nemesis of many not-for-profit boards who think they have to use it. It's really just a set of rules that are supposed to help you in your decision-making process. So our legislation says something, but it doesn't talk about how we're supposed to do this thing. This is a set of rules that's supposed to support us. Can you learn it? Absolutely. Is it the best for your board? I don't know. You should have that conversation if that's actually helping you or hindering your discussion. And that might be a great value add you do as a new board member, is to say, I'm really struggling with the flow of things. Is this serving us, or is there a better way? So that's on that. Time commitment, ask. Because it's going to depend. If you are on an operational board where you are doing both operational stuff and governance stuff, you're probably going to be expected to have more time committed. But a good rule of thumb is, they always say people who are in a profession being paid are working 2,000 hours, then the board's working 200 hours. So it's I would expect kind of with board meetings and then potentially other stuff you're doing outside of those meetings, at least probably 100 hours a year, but ask the board, ask what their expectations are around it. And then the last question, I'd love, Erin, for you to think on this one, is around that fundraising piece. If boards are expecting people to come with money, and the distinction, the question is, how does one get around where a board wants them to donate thousands of dollars to an organization? Personally, I've experienced this, even though there's still tremendous value to bring to the board. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a very important question as you explore which board you are going to pursue, and having that conversation with members of the existing board. I was on a board previously where it became sort of an expectation of making a significant donation, which I at the time was not able to do financially. And at that point, I really had thought my time was my contribution to achieving this goal that the board and the organization was working towards. So I think it's really important for you to be clear up front around that. And if you are in a place to make a financial contribution, then I think it makes even more sense to be aligned to what the values and the mission of the organization are. So then you know where your dollars are going and you know you're adding that value. So
and if you're on a board, recognize that might be creating a barrier for some really good talent to join you and have that conversation. Like, I get it, and it might be needed for certain elements, but contemplate if there's different options for different people depending on where they're coming from in life. Katherine, exactly. I see you popping up. I know we have 3 minutes, so I will turn it back to you for some closing thoughts.
Well, thank you so much. That was an incredible conversation to Chantel and all of our panelists. On behalf of YWCA Edmonton and DirectHer, I really do want to thank all of you at home or if you're in your office today for taking the time, for taking this hour and getting on this Zoom call to just listen to just experiences, but also some really great learned experiences about tips and advice on how you can take that next step. I personally, and I was thinking, I would have loved to have heard this conversation years ago before I took the leap to be on a board. I came from a journalism background, thought I didn't really have any great skills that would lend themselves to a board. I don't know why I thought that. And I always remember making that step and then sitting at the board, and there's Robert Rules of Order, and I was paralyzed, not thinking like, I'm in the wrong place. I don't know why I'm here. I'm glad I stuck it out, because those board experiences that I have had have personally been the most enriching things I've done in my career, and actually have led me to my position at YWCA Edmonton. So I really do hope that if you're at home and listening to this, if you don't join a board in the next month, that you think about it even in a year from now, and reach out to myself or anyone on the panel. I'm volunteering you to just have a conversation, because we really do need our boards to look like the communities they serve, all types, all, bigger, small, corporate, not-for-profit, government. They have to. We will have better decisions, and in the long run, we build stronger, safer, more equitable communities for all when we do this work. So I want to thank you again for joining us. If you want more information about YWCA Edmonton or DirectHer Network, please head to our websites. DirectHer Network and YWCA have some really awesome events coming up in the next 12 months. We are looking at hosting board retreats at Camp YWCA. There will be on November 6th. DirectHer has organized an all-day session for those newcomers to a board, not a board basics course, but something to teach you about financial literacy and things like that. So if you've thought, okay, I'm in now, I highly recommend November 6th and joining that call, because that really will take you to the next step and give you that confidence that you'll be able to serve on a board and be very confident that you'll be able to contribute quickly. So
yeah,
again,
we've thrown the links to the November 6th in the chat for anyone who wants to follow those. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to ask or navigate any answers to what November 6th and board camp is all about, especially for those who are newer to government.
And this is why we've partnered. DirectHer Network has just really done an incredible job of bringing together the right information and to really set you up for success. So again, thank you for giving us your time. Be on the lookout for future events, and I can't wait to see what you do on your future boards. This is really a start of something really amazing. Talk to you soon. Have a great day.
And thanks to our panelists. Thank you so much.
Thanks, panelists.